Hello, and thank you for joining me for this presentation on theoretical frameworks and methodologies. I was hoping to present this in person, and I'm sorry that I didn't happen to work out that way. Anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that we've started this summer, some colleagues of mine and some students and I, concerning the use of metaphor in geology textbooks and student learning in the context of those metaphors. The theoretical framework we are using for this current study goes by different names depending on the discipline you are approaching the research from. Most often it is referred to as conceptual metaphor theory. It is founded on the notion that we develop meaning of the world through our concrete experiences with the world, through our five senses. When we need to develop meaning for an abstract concept, we can only use the knowledge we have from these concrete experiences. We project the meaning from the concrete experiences onto the abstract concept through the use of metaphor. The sample sentences here use metaphors for the abstract concept of I understand. The source of these metaphors are the concrete experiences we have using our five senses to understand our environment. We all started to make sense of our environment as infants by grabbing or grasping a hold of something and sticking it in our mouths to taste it. These very concrete actions and experiences became the past experiences that we use to construct the meaning of our world, not just for those things that we can grasp and taste, but also for those things, those abstract concepts that we cannot sense with our body. Importantly, metaphors help us reason about abstract concepts as well. Metaphor has been a very important tool in the development of scientific ideas in all disciplines, like our understanding of the mind, which has changed through time from being a system of hydraulics to that of a computer. Old metaphors begin to lose their effectiveness and eventually get replaced by newer metaphors. This is very much in line with a Kuhnian paradigm shift. I will also note that metaphors have an unconscious effect on how we perceive our environment. They can influence how we perceive particular concepts. Like putting on a pair of rose-colored glasses influences how we perceive our environment, use of a metaphor can trigger what Lakoff and Johnson identify as an experiential gestalt, or what Kahneman referred to as a cascade of associations, where related concepts are seen unconsciously or framed within the context of the metaphor being used. For instance, two groups of people read news articles about the same problem of crime in their city. Only one of the articles of crime described crime as a virus infecting the city, a metaphor, and the second article talked about crime as a beast attacking the city. When researchers asked the people what they thought would be the best way to address the crime issue, those having read the crime was a virus infecting metaphor article were more in favor of systemic reform-oriented strategies, taking care of the body. While those who read about crime as a beast attacking, they were more likely to advocate for direct enforcement or fighting back, defending the city. It is important to note that, like all models, metaphors highlight certain aspects of the target, but also hide aspects as well. As experts, we often take for granted where the metaphor does and does not map onto reality, while novices have much less experience with what they should pay attention to and what they should not pay attention to. This could lead to the development of unintended understandings. For instance, a black hole is not really a hole in space that stuff falls into. It is an incredibly dense mass which stuff is attracted to. The hole metaphor could lead some to think in a particular way about the nature of perception. In my own research, understanding how students develop knowledge about earthquakes and why and how they happen, I found that the metaphor plate in tectonic plate seemed to be inhibiting their understanding. The word tectonic, to a novice, has very little meaning at all, if any. However, plate is something that they have plenty of concrete experience with. They more than likely ate off a plate for dinner last night. To them, plates are separate and brittle and can be pushed together, can rub past each other, can crash into each other and break. This was how they often described how earthquakes happened, plates colliding or rubbing against each other and breaking. There was no consideration of the elastic nature of rocks and that earthquakes were actually the release of elastic potential energy. In fact, the notion of rocks being elastic at all is not even within their experiential toolbox. Taking a conceptual metaphor theory approach helps give direction for how to teach this abstract concept, to develop a strategy that would highlight aspects of the phenomenon necessary for understanding the phenomenon. So first, we would be giving students experiences in the target domain of elasticity of rocks. I use a sandstone drill core, similar to the marble tongs pictured here. The core was long and had a slit sawn up the center about 2/3 of the way. I could then pinch the end and it would close like tweezers and then open back up when released, showing the elastic property of the rock. Second, I gave experience in an embodied source domain, the skin. The skin is whole and it shows elasticity, and all people have experience with their own skin. So we can talk about the crust of the earth being the skin of the earth. Third is reflecting the embodied source domain using a molecular kit and balls and springs to demonstrate how elasticity works within the molecular structure of a rock. And then lastly, we can talk about the metaphors, how the metaphor highlights and hides aspects of the target concept. Introducing the tectonic plate metaphor now, after building a more robust understanding for the nature of the lithosphere, should be less problematic for the novice. Now, I would like to switch gears a little and talk a bit about the methodology of this study. How do we go about identifying these metaphors? Steen and his colleagues in 2010 described the metaphor identification procedure in their book. I went ahead and made a flowchart of this description. The flowchart seems complicated, but in the end, it's really about looking at the text one word at a time, and then comparing the meaning of the word used within the context of the text to the word's most basic and concrete meaning, using a standard dictionary. If there is enough of a difference between the two different numbered definitions, for instance, then the word was identified as metaphorical. We could then analyze the metaphor for its source meaning and how it is being used in the text. The following will give some examples of what we've found so far. So what we would do is take, say, a sentence like the sentence here, which has the word bodies in it. We would look at each word, plates move as rigid bodies, but I'm just picking out bodies as one example of how we would determine whether it was metaphoric or not. The word in context of the sentence is meaning number 4 from our dictionary. That definition was the main or central part of the crustal area. The basic meaning is meaning 1, definition 1 in the dictionary, the whole physical structure of a person or animal, including the head, arms, and legs. So these two meanings are really quite different, and therefore we're going to classify this word bodies as a metaphor-related word, and the metaphor is, as we discerned, rocks are a person. Other types of metaphors that we have found are these deliberate metaphors. Deliberate metaphors are ones that are used explicitly by the text to make a point, to teach a particular concept. So in this case, we have mountain ranges had formed like wrinkles on a dried up apple. This is a deliberate example or a deliberate metaphor to give us a sort of an understanding of how these mountains formed. Indirect metaphors we looked at these are metaphors which are part of the scientific language, part of the language of science. So continental drift, where the metaphor is continents are icebergs. Tectonic plates, the lithosphere is a ceramic dinner plate. Earth's crust, the Earth is a loaf of bread. And then finally, we found identified implicit metaphors. These are incidental metaphors based on the language of the author writing the text. So it's not the scientific language, it is the way the author frames the scientific language. And these are some examples for the metaphor, Earth is or rocks are a person. Plates move in a rational manner. The mantle pushing up. Mantle plumes were responsible for. A mature island. Understood their relative age. These were all coming out of the text that we were analyzing, one of the texts. So anyways, what we would like to do is continue to map these metaphors that are used for different concepts, and we were looking at tectonics, global warming, seismology, and other sort of major geological concepts. We want to identify potentially problematic metaphors for learning, and this would include observations of students within classes, and maybe cross-referencing to the misconceptions literature. And then finally develop mitigation strategies like the ones we did I demonstrated for tectonic plates, maybe even coming up with some new metaphors that would sort of be preemptive to the metaphors being used that might cause unintended learning. And with that, I will conclude. If there are any questions, I am happy to take them.